We're now joined by Monroe County Director of Schools, Dr. DeAnna McClendon, to talk about the ever-moving target of when school going to begin. Dr. McClendon, we thank you for spending a few moments with us, and I know this has had to have been a trying time trying to figure out what to do.
Yes, we had talked before, and as of March the 20th, school was shut down. And we have been operating in shutdown mode and just taking direction from the state and the health department. And so it's been very different times. Could I say that? Now, one thing I'm proud and excited about, being in a small community like Monroe County, we have a tag or a slogan, Monroe Strong. And I think there's a new one about Monroe Cares, encouraging people to wear their mask in public places. So I'm excited to be in a community that does care so much and is so strong, and just the impact our community has had on those that are less fortunate or those who are going through trying times. I'm encouraged by that. And so some of that, or a lot of that grace and mercy, we'll have to use as we open schools. There's not a rule book. So we have a plan. We hope that our plan is a term we use called flip the switch. We hope that we can flip the switch as needed based on what is happening in our community. But we'll have to have a lot of grace and mercy. We'll ask for Monroe County to care as we go through this. I have a colleague that I used to work with, David Stevens, and he used to say, we are building the airplane as we fly it. There's no rule book for this since we're in such unprecedented times. And that's where we are.
So walk us through, I know you've probably been in a ton of meetings trying to make decisions. As of right now, mid-July, what is the plan for Monroe County Schools for the 2021 school year?
Well, let me just first say we're going to open up. We're going to open up on time. Okay. So for all those children, especially those that live in my house, I want them to know that school will be open. And they will be attending. So a couple of things, though, just to back up, because when you think about putting a plan like this together, there are lots of different agencies that you need to receive feedback from. Yeah. It's not a plan that you put together without even consulting your community. So one of the first things that we did early on, as we moved closer to opening school or thinking about what would our opening plan look like, we actually surveyed our parents. And, we're a school district with just a little bit over 5,100, almost 5,200 students. And so we wanted to make sure that the teachers and the principals and the central office and the parents and even the students had an opportunity to tell us what they wanted. Because we didn't want it to be Dr. McClendon's plan or central office's plan or the state of Tennessee's plan. We wanted it to be our community's plan to what they felt like was important. Right. And so I don't know if you do a little research. A lot of times when you ask for people to fill out a survey, you don't get a lot of people to fill out your survey. But we were fortunate, and we had almost 2,700 people. Really? To respond to our survey. And another thing that was very critical for us, it wasn't just in one area. Because sometimes you can feel like, okay, well, just one district is having a say. District 1 or District 2 or District 3, they are the people guiding the plan. One of the things I can say about the respondents to this survey, every school had respondents, from our smallest school to our largest school. Of course, Sequoia High School, their footprint is larger in our school community. They had the most respondents, and you would have thought that. But even when you think about one of our smallest schools, Cocoa Creek, one of our small rural schools, they actually had about 67 respondents to the survey. And so they only have an enrollment of about 70 students. And so to get 67 respondents from that particular area, I thought that was very good. So I think we have a great cross section of all of our schools and all of our districts represented. We had community members who responded. We had teachers who responded. We had students themselves who responded. We had parents. We had community members who responded. Our county commission, we had some after we got our survey results together, we put together a plan, just a draft. We asked for feedback, and we had many advisory council meetings. Our teachers union, they were instrumental in giving us some feedback, and they asked some tough questions. Our county commission was present. We had some board members. One of my favorite advisory groups that we talked to after we put together sort of a basic plan was our student group. Students really shared a lot of information or a lot of thoughts that we hadn't thought about. For instance, we had a student that said, hey, what are you going to do about students who can't use hand soap or the hand sanitizer? And we said, well, are you allergic? And she said, I am. And so she made us think about what do we do in the cases where students have those special concerns. We were able to ask students, too, what would make you take this seriously? And they said education. They said our parents need to talk to us about the importance of wearing these masks. They said our teachers need to talk to us, maybe some videos. And they said, you know, we just didn't realize how serious it was. But they felt that most students were mature enough that they would recognize and that they were owed sort of a conversation and a teaching moment. And so that was very good. But we got a lot of good feedback from the students. So that's a stakeholder, a group of people who we're going to be asking to follow these procedures and guidelines. And so it was important that we got their feedback, and I'm glad that we did. That was one of our most important groups. But of course, we had families and we had parents there as well that were able to share. So that was great. So thinking through that, we took that as the basis. And some of the things that came out in our survey is about 61% of our respondents actually indicated that they would prefer schools to be open, and they wanted students attending physically. So overwhelmingly, people said, we want our children in school. But now they did say, but we want them to attend with safety precautions in place. So that's important to note that well over half wanted students to attend a school, but they wanted safety precautions in place. And so we had to think through, what does that mean? What do those safety precautions mean? And then we had another 15% almost that said, we'd like a virtual option. We think there should be a virtual option for families. And so in thinking through that, we'll have two options for families. Option one will be to attend a brick and mortar, and there will be things in place. For instance, in the morning, there'll be temperature checks. I know I dropped my daughter off this morning at a summer academic camp to kind of fit in with the gap, and there was a teacher out there with a cart. The teacher had on a mask and gloves, and she was checking the temperatures of each of those students, and those students all had on a mask, and they were walking in the building. And so students will be asked, that's a big question, when will students have to have on masks? Students will only have to have masks on when they're in that process. So like this morning in line, we were 6 feet apart. We had her, she was taking the gun and she was checking children in, and they were walking in the building with their mask on if it was applicable for them. Now, if you have some sort of asthma problem or breathing issue or something of that particular nature, then we do know that everyone can't wear a mask, especially if they can't remove it themselves. And so, of course, we'll have doctor's notes and things that would excuse children from wearing a mask. Now, they won't wear the mask all day. When they come in, they'll be separated, socially distanced to the extent possible. So we'll make sure the classrooms are as cleaned out of all the extra items. You know, teachers, we can be pack rats. I know I'm a teacher. I still wear my teacher hat, and I am still a big pack rat. And so then we'll social distance maybe about 6 feet apart as we can. And then we will ask children when they get to their seats, or students when they get to their seat, they can take their mask down. I've encouraged, and I demonstrated the other night at the board meeting, those infinity scarves are probably like the infinity mask are like the best thing, because children often can't find those. I know my daughter has 4 or 5, and at any given time, she knows where none of them are.
Yeah. And
so if they have the infinity mask, they just slip it on. And when they get to their seat or wherever they are, and they're sitting facing forward and within social distance, they can just slip the mask off. Teachers will be the same same way, we'll just ask them in common areas to wear those types of things and be prepared. And then the option 2 is our virtual option. We'll be having virtual school. There's a link on Monroe County, monroe.k12.tn.us. On our actual homepage, there's a link now to go ahead and register, or not register, but to fill out an intent to apply form for our virtual learning. That's an option, but we have to be careful because I've had several questions today, even from family members who said, I think I'm interested in taking the virtual option. And I've said, you've got to have computer equipment and you've got to be able to be on the internet. And they said, well, will you have to be on the internet 5 or 6 hours a day? And I said, yes, the state has been very clear about the accountability and the attendance guidelines that students must adhere to. So whether you're in a brick and mortar building or if you're in our virtual option, you still will have to account for that seat time according to Tennessee guidelines. And so parents may think that the virtual option is a better option for them. I'd like for us to do some sort of cooperating agreement or activity with our homeschool families because I think they're really going to like this virtual program. I know I took a class, not a class, but I sat in a session of a class. I think it was one on Edgar Allan Poe, and he's one of my favorite poets, and it was very intriguing to watch them. Now, I don't know that that's my modality of learning, but did I learn about Edgar Allan Poe, or were some things I knew about him reinforced? Yes. And then I did maybe a 6th grade English lesson, and I felt the same way. So do I feel like it's the best option? No, but it might be the best options for families right now. Do I think children could learn using that modality and using that program? Absolutely, I do.
Dr. DeAnna McClendon, she's talking with us about what the school year is going to look like for 2021. The plan is to open on time with brick and mortar learning, but also the virtual option as well. And you kind of touched on it, Dr. McClendon, about attendance. It's not required to be at the brick and mortar, but attendance will be kept in some form, even if you're doing it virtually, correct?
Correct. Absolutely. Attendance will be required whether you're doing it virtually or whether you are in one of our buildings. And that is a requirement not of our school district or Dr. McClendon, but of the State Department of Education. They've been very clear that students are supposed to have about 6.5 hours learning every day for about 180 days. We know that looks very different in a virtual space because children in the virtual space may be doing their homework at night when families are there. Children may be doing some of that homework or some of that schoolwork on the weekends or holidays when other children are out of our brick and mortar buildings, but they will still have to account, for their time and to complete their assignments. And I think that's good. It's the rigor that is needed to go on and be successful. We know that future success is frequently determined by academic attainment, and our primary goal always is to make sure that we're educating our children just because they're our future and what is intended to move forward here for our county.
Of course, we're hearing ideas other school systems are doing. My wife's a teacher in a neighboring county, and so I know what the plan is for her school system. As far as Monroe County, if every child chose to come, is maximum attendance, is that part of the plan, or is planned to stagger some students so you don't have that full capacity in a brick and mortar?
So one of the things that has not been such a great option for us, most other districts, and I'm sure your wife's district is probably like this, just because we're behind a little bit in Monroe County, they have already on what I call one-to-one with their students to devices. One of the things, unfortunately, that Monroe County has not been able to do in the past, we don't have textbooks. Our textbooks are probably about 20 years old. And we're trying to remedy that with this new budget with the county commission. And then secondly, with our CARES Act funding, we are trying to take our grade level 6 through 12 one-to-one with devices. So many districts are able to propose a staggered in entry or a hybrid approach, a hybrid model. We're not able to do that because we don't have the devices. We have received our approval for our CARES Act funding, but when we've gone to, in fact, order our devices, the time frame or time window is about November to January. And I would bet, if I was a betting person, it might be closer to January than November if we're looking at that window. And so that does not afford our students the hybrid approach that other counties or systems might be implementing. The state refers to what we would have to do as a packet method, meaning our children would pick up a packet. They would complete the packet. Children or students would engage with their teacher or some other professional on a Microsoft meeting or a Zoom or a Google Classroom format for a certain particular number of hours to teach that. And if you look in our plan, you will see that we do have that in case we do have to go virtually, but we just feel that right now, given some of the constraints financially that we're in, we wouldn't be able to really effectively educate our children using that format. Now, who's to say that we open up and we hit our thresholds and that we don't have to go to there, and we will be a packet district and we'll smile and we'll make it happen because we are Monroe County and we're strong and we'll do it. Do I think that's the best option for our families and for our teachers? I do not. So I'm hopeful that if we can engage in being hyper vigilant of some of the recommendations that have been made by our healthcare professionals here in the state and locally with our health department, as well as the CDC, I'm hopeful that we can keep our cases at a minimum threshold so that we can continue to maintain school open. Do I think we're going to have cases of outbreaks? Yes, I think we do. I think we will. I think we would whether school was in or not. School's not in right now, and I think we're probably very close to 50 cases, active cases of COVID-19 in Monroe County, and that's the most that it's ever been since the onslaught of the pandemic. So that's something to be concerned about and to be watchful. We'll be watchful and mindful of that. One of the things that we'll be using as our guide is we actually have a wheel based on the work of our local health department and our state health department. And in those guidelines that were shared with us, and you'll see it on our actual homepage of our website, we know the number of cases so that we can move through our plan. So our plan, of course, has a green level, meaning go full operations. We have a yellow level, which means caution, and then we have a red level. That means we have a lot of active cases, and we've used those guidelines to help us flip the switch. We've used the population of Monroe County, which is, well, it's a little bit over 46,000 people according to the census in 2018. And so if we get 232 or less cases in our community, that's less than 0.5%. And so that's not saying that you have a lot of cases in your community or active cases if you're below that number.
That's active cases. That's
active.
Yes.
Active. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good to be very clear.
Yeah.
So active cases, and then we know that yellow, if we get to about 233 to about 464 cases, we'll move from green to yellow. Right now, the governor has several orders in place, and so because of that, we will open school in the yellow, meaning that on bus transportation, students will wear a mask. We will be limiting the number of children that are in spaces, no more than 50 at a time. We will be social distancing in the cafeteria, so that might mean that children are not going to all be on their regular cafeteria schedule. Maybe the building principal is going to have to add some additional times, or children may be partaking in eating sort of family style in their classroom with their teacher. Those are things that will be individualized by each school based on their enrollment and attendance. And we really won't know that until the fall and once students enter into the buildings. The plans, I think principals will be working on the plans probably the 27th of July. They'll be releasing those plans to families, and we'll be posting them online. So the guidance is actually on our website, and faculty members and principals and community members for those particular school locations will actually be reviewing our guidelines and creating individualized guidelines for their schools.
I've actually went to Monroe County Schools website, looked at the guidelines. They're easy to access. They're there and detail everything. And this is Monroe County Schools Director, Dr. DeAnna McClendon, with us today. And Dr. McClendon, let's talk about a hypothetical, one that's likely to happen. Let's say a school bus or even an individual school, there's 2 or 3 cases pop up, and there's been probably 15 other kids around them. What's the scenario then? Are you asking all 18 to then quarantine and go to virtual at that point, or what would that look like?
So we have guidelines in place. And so the first thing that would happen, if that happens, if you have been around someone who tests positive for longer than 15 minutes, then you are to quarantine between 10 and 14 days. And so one of the things that we're going to ask or suggest to families and employees, if you have been around someone where that's the case, we're going to encourage you maybe to go seek out a test at that point. We can't mandate it or require it, but it would make sense that if you're around someone for longer than 15 minutes. So having said that, anywhere that child has been and been for 15 minutes, they will have to quarantine. So let me give you a very real scenario that happened to us here. And this is why we're saying you have to be so careful. We had an employee who had a family member who was not feeling well. And so for a period of time, they were in the presence or close proximity with their family member. Mm-hmm. And so then they were in turn coming to work and worked in a small group of 10 or 12. And they were around all of those employees for probably hours at a time. And then they ended up not feeling well. They said, oh, I don't feel so well either. So the initial employee did test positive and was out for 14 days. And fortunately, I don't believe any of the people that were working with that employee ended up with it, but they were wearing masks and they did not end up with it. But just to show you how that contract tracing works, one of those 12 employees is a spouse of one of our employees here at the central office. And so the employee that tested positive had been around one of her team members had been around one of the central office team members very closely. So had that test came back positive, and then the person that worked in this building test came back positive, then they could have taken down the whole central office in one swoop. So there we go. In 3 moves, it could have taken out our entire central office. It took out that team. And so one of the things that I think that we need to be real careful about, if you know someone's sick, we're so we're such a society that we're tough and we're strong and we push through. I couldn't tell you the number of times I've been sick. I'll admit it that I'm a single parent, and there have been times when I know my daughter or child was sick and I had something important and I said, oh, you got to go to school, try to make it. And off to school that I sent them. We're just not going to be able to do that anymore. We're just going to have to be very cognizant and very conscious that when our children or even ourselves exhibit those types of symptoms, we're going to have to take the time to make sure that we're clear and that we're okay. And we're going to have to definitely make sure that we're very careful that if someone has said, hey, I'm sick or I'm not feeling well, we need to make sure that we're social distancing. From them, if at all possible, to the extent possible. And so I think this will happen. Do I think that we'll take out whole classrooms of students? Yes. And that's why we want to limit the number of different people that students are around. Do I think that we could take out a whole bus? Absolutely. I think that we could. Do I think it's going to happen? I absolutely do think that it would happen.
Yeah. Along those same lines, I try to ask the questions that I think people would want to ask. I'm sure people would say, well, how in the world are you going to get a school full of kids to social distance? How are you going to get them to wear a mask? What happens if a child refuses to wear a mask? Just those things, I'm sure people would want to pose that question if they had the opportunity.
So those are questions we had too.
Yeah.
And so that's why that student advisory group was so important to the process. They were probably the most important group, I hate to say it, that we talked to, because those were questions that we asked them. And again, these were some very thoughtful students, and I had some high-flying academic people in the room, but then I had some people who struggle academically in the room. Mm-hmm. And I know personally. And so they all took it very seriously. They understood the process, and they again said over and over again, each of them, I think our teachers need to talk to us about this. I think our parents need to talk to us about this. They said, maybe I've been playing and I've not taken it as serious as I should, but even just coming to this today has made me take it more serious. And so I think that's critical. Now, do I think we're going to be writing up children and kicking them out of school and kicking them off the bus? I don't. Mm-hmm. Do I want bus drivers distracted, telling children to put their mask up? I do not. But I think the very first time one of their friends gets sick and they get scared, or I think the very first time they have to remain at home for 10 to 14 days, I think you won't have to tell them anymore. I know I have a little cowgirl that lives at my house, and she has about gone crazy, stir crazy, and driven everyone at home crazy having to stay in. And so she is excited about getting to go to like her summer learning camp. So today, I didn't even have to tell her to put her mask on. She had her mask. When we got in line, she put it on and she kept it on. Now, I don't know if she'll get home with it today or not. And there'll be lots of children who lose their mask. And we have, fortunately, been given lots of donated masks and throwaway masks. But a couple things we're going to ask for on the school supply list this year. We're going to ask that children bring a jump drive, because what happens is if we know we're going to go out, we may be loading lots of material for students to work on that packet, on their jump drive. We're also going to ask students to bring a mask. I know several of the board members were worried about children having masks. And I said, guess what? This is the new accessory. Mm-hmm. So you know how you think about hair bows and earrings or shoelaces or whatever the new thing is. I think this year the girls had those hair ties around their wrists. I said, these are the new accessories. And I said, they have them. I said, my child has them all the way from Mickey Mouse to Star Wars. And I said, so we'll just have to think through with our children how important having that mask is, and always having one. And then if they lose one or it gets dirty and it needs to be replaced, we'll have a few extras. Another thing we'll ask is that parents, if they have them, they'll send in Clorox wipes, mm-hmm. or things of that particular nature. So those will be the new things on supply list. You know, we always think of pencils and papers, but we have some funding, and we have some funding from our CARES Act to supply all those materials. But of course, we know we're a district whose budget is very, very tight. So anything that civic organizations or booster club groups or parents or others can do and donate, we welcome those donations as well.
Monroe County Schools Director, Dr. DeAnna McClendon. And in this interview, she said the plan is to start on time in Monroe County, and kids coming to brick and mortar, that actually to the school building, but a virtual option is available for those who don't feel comfortable coming back at this time. Dr. McClendon, when is the first day of school then?
So August the 7th is the first day of school. Let me just verify that. I don't want to give you the wrong date. Yes, August the 7th is the first day, and I think they just come. It's one of those little half-a-days, mm-hmm. And so there won't be any bus transportation on that particular day. And then the following Monday will be full force with bus transportation.
If people, again, want to see all the details of the plan, they can go to Monroe County Schools website.
Monroe.k12.tn.us. If they'll go to our homepage, at the very top, there's the graphic that tells you how we'll be flipping the switch through our plan. And then there also will tell you There's a link, and if you click on it, the whole plan is there, and everybody can read it. And I'll tell you something that's very good in that document. When we had the advisory councils to come in, we had a frequently asked questions section. And so we put all those questions in there with responses. We also did a Facebook Live on Friday afternoon, and we got some additional great questions, and we put all that information in our FAQs that are in that particular document. So sometimes that document might be sort of an easy read, a quick read to questions you have.
Okay. And if people see this interview, hear this interview on the radio, and they have a question, or their question doesn't get answered through this conversation, or they read that online and have more questions, how can they get answers to that?
Yes, so I would just say off the top, email is very good. Either I'll get you an answer or get someone from my staff to answer you. If you email me at mcclendond, McClendon, at monroe.k12.tn.us.
Okay.
That'd be a great way to touch bases and us to get an answer. I've already had some parents emailing me today, and I've responded or had staff to respond back to them. Now, let me say this. I won't promise you'll always like the answer. So I had a mom said, you know what? I don't like the answer, but you did have a good answer. She said, I don't like it. And I said, I understand.
Yeah.
We are just really living in different times. And I think just because we are the second largest employer, and this was one thing I was sharing with our school district, with our school board, as they were working to think through what our plan should look like. I said, we have to be so careful. We're the second largest employer. We have over 5,000 students. And so if we internally are not careful and cautious and make sure we have a good procedure and system up in place, we could influence what happens in the rest of the community. So very quickly, Sequoia has over 950 students. We need to, if we get a good 2 or 3 cases going at Sequoia, and we're not cleaning, and we're not social distancing, and we're not wearing our masks, we could very quickly have 250 cases just out of that one high school. So that's why it's going to be very important for us to be careful, to be thoughtful. We want academics to go on, but we want it to be in a place that we know is safe and clean and protective of our entire community, not just our school community.
And then we plan to follow up this interview maybe next week, have live radio Q&A on WDEH AM 800, but follow our Facebook pages and we'll update exactly the plans for that, because I know people out there, they have a ton of questions and they want an outlet to try to get those answered the best they can, respectfully, because sometimes, as you said, they may not like the answer, but it is what it is. I think everybody is trying to hit a moving target at this point.
And sometimes it's good just to have a space to say that.
Yeah.
I know in working with parents, sometimes you have to just say, I know you don't like it, but these are the rules, and I can appreciate that you don't like it. And a lot of times parents will say, I just wanted somebody to recognize that I didn't like it.
Yeah.
But we'll follow the rules.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Dr. McClendon, as we wrap up the interview today, is there anything else you would like to share for the parents that might be watching this or listening to it on the radio?
No, I look forward to that live Q&A, but always feel free to reach out to my office, to reach out to me at that McClendon D at Monroe K12.tn.us. I always feel on any matter, not just opening up about this, any concerns or questions you have, always feel free to reach out to me or your building administrator. You are your child's best advocate, no matter if we're in the middle of a pandemic or not. And so we want to get it right. We want to get the academics right. I'm encouraged. It seems like we've got our school board that is asking the tough questions, which is good, but we're getting it right. It seems like the county commission, they understand we have a solid plan, and they're willing to fund some of the necessary things that are needed. And so I feel like we're at a precipice of really getting things right academically here in our county. And I think this is just another hurdle that we have to plan for, have a process to make it through, and then I think we'll see each other on the other side, and we'll all be better for it.
Well, we thank you for your time, and we want people who watch this and listen to it to give us feedback. Was this helpful? Because we continue to try to provide these things for community information, because people are looking for that information. We want to be a source for that. Dr. McClendon, thank you, and appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you, and I would say to the residents of Monroe County, as I always do, I love you. There's nothing you can do about it, and hopefully we'll be talking next Tuesday.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.